Hey everyone. All right, so this week you are talking about personality. This is our next to last of new information that you need for the AP exam. The problem with this unit is normally like we really focus on the concept, the overall concept of like what causes a personality. That's the idea of this is what makes us who we are, like what gives us our personality. Is it something that's inherited? Is it something that, is nature versus nurture? And obviously it's, a combination of both. But we hit some big people that we have not talked about in great detail yet. So, because we're doing this distance learning, I just really want you to focus on applying terms instead of wrapping your mind around the huge concept of where your personality comes from. Because what you're going to need to do on the AP exam, if they reference any of this, which normally they do, like the big trait, the big five traits were on it a couple years ago. So that could show up again. So I'm just more worried of you being able to apply the term other than you trying to like really get the whole giant whopping concept down. All right, so let's talk. You're going to be filling out your content notes that go along with this. They're pretty long because this is a hefty unit, so I'm sure this will go into at least 2 videos. Okay, so what is personality? It's your characteristic pattern of thinking, feeling, and acting. Bottom line, the word that you have to have for personality is pattern. In order for something to be a part of your personality, it is a pattern. So it's not something that happens once randomly. It is how you consistently think, feel, and act. That is your personality. So if you ever see anything on these FRQs that's mentioning personality, throw in the word pattern because it is the pattern of thinking, feeling, and acting. Okay, it can't just be once. First person that we're going to talk about is Freud, and that is the psychoanalytic perspective. So Sigmund Freud, anytime you see psychoanalysis or psychoanalytic, you automatically need to associate Sigmund Freud with it. Okay? I don't feel that they will focus intently on Freud because he is such a controversial figure, and obviously a lot of the stuff that he came up with is so wrong, but we're going to hit the highlights of what he is famous for. So Sigmund Freud believed that the majority of your mind was like an iceberg. It was called your unconscious. And that we are only aware of a tiny little bit of what goes on in our mind. And that's like an iceberg, right? Titanic sunk because when you see an iceberg, you only see a little bit, and the majority of it is underneath water. So Freud believed that he developed a theory of how we could get all of the stuff that was going on in your mind out that you had no idea that was in there. And he used something called free association to do this. He believed it was better than hypnosis, and that free association was to get someone to just talk, and like literally their stream of thought, their stream of consciousness would show what was coming out of their unconscious. Okay, he used this with people, and once again, anyone that went to Freud, everything is always blamed on the mother and sexual repression. Okay. He believed your unconscious contained your thoughts, your wishes, your feelings, and the memories of which you were unaware. We know, thanks to Elizabeth Loftus and other people who study memory, you don't have memories which you are unaware. We don't repress memories. Certainly you have things that you forget, but you don't repress them, meaning a psychologist or a psychiatrist cannot pull them out and you're like, oh, that did happen, and I've just been burying it for years. That's not how that works. Okay. Now, Freud also believed that we put in our unconscious unacceptable passions that we know that we cannot show, but we must repress in our unconscious, and they come out in a disguised way. We'll talk about this more when we get to defense mechanisms. Now, the thing that very well may show up that people talk about a lot with Freud is Freud believed that consistently going on in yourself, in your mind, was a battle between 3 things: your id, your ego, and your superego. This is not id, is pronounced id. Your id, your ego, and your superego. He said that all day long you are trying to satisfy these 3. And basically, who we are is which one of these wins out. So your id is what happens basically when you're a baby. Like my toddler only operates off of his id. He wants what he wants, and he is aggressive until he gets it. So he wants immediate gratification. Like when he's hungry, he wants food. There's no, honey, we need to wait. We need to wait until lunch. No, if he's hungry, he wants food and he wants it now. When he's tired, he wants to sleep and he wants it now. There's no delaying the gratification. This also is very much always associated with people who are addicted to drugs or alcohol, because they cannot stop the want of the substance. They want it then, they want it now, and that's that immediate gratification. Okay, your ego is what you start to develop as you are growing up, and it helps you to learn to cope with the world. Your ego is what allows you, when you say, Mommy, I want that candy bar, and she says, well, honey, we're going to go home and have dinner, maybe we can have it later, that you don't have a giant tantrum over the candy bar, because you have this ego that can cope and say, all right, maybe I'll get it later if I behave. Your super ego happens around 4 or 5. It's that voice of conscience that forces the ego to consider not just the real, but the ideal. Bottom line, your super ego is how you should behave. And I want you to think of it as the angel and the devil. The devil is the id on your shoulder. Your angel is your super ego, and you are the ego. You have to cope between the two. Your id is telling you one thing, your super ego is telling you another. So if somebody has a very, very strong super ego, they are someone who is very virtuous, yet they always feel guilty that they could be doing better or could be doing more. If somebody has a weak superego, meaning that they don't get to use their ego a lot, then they're going to be self-indulgent and remorseless, okay? So the superego opposes the id, so the ego tries to reconcile between the two. This, hopefully, please really, really look at this in your book, because that could be one of the only things they pull from for Freud is the id, the ego, and the superego. So somebody who gives in to what they want to do all the time, they're following their id, okay? All right, the psychosexual stages of Freud, as interesting as they are, I highly doubt that they're going to be used on the AP exam. I'm going to kind of run through them quickly so you have an idea. Freud believed that as you develop, that you enter psychosexual stages. He believed the oral stage lasted for about the first 1.5 years of your life, and he said that all of your pleasure is geared around your mouth. Things like sucking, biting, chewing, which if you think about it, that makes sense. When you're a baby, you have a passy, you suck on your thumb, everything goes from hand to mouth. But Freud believed that if you did not get enough pleasure out of the oral stage, that this is why people would smoke. This is why people would be smokers. This is why people would use biting sarcasm, is because they were not satisfied in the oral psychosexual stage. The anal stage is 18 to 36 months, and this is having to do with your ability to go to the bathroom, like potty train. This is the only one that I actually put any kind of stock in because I've seen it in action. Freud believed that if you could not potty train, if you were one of those kids who took forever to potty train, your parents were worried they were going to send you to kindergarten in diapers, that you would then be considered as you grow up to be someone who's anal. You're very picky about everything, very picky about your surroundings, you're very organized, you're very neat. And Freud said that came from your inability to control your bladder, so now you must control your environment. Versus if you're someone who got potty training very quickly, like that, you are a master of your domain, that you are a slob. Because you could control your bladder, you did not feel the need to control the environment around you, so you're someone who's just very messy and disgusting and kind of a pigsty kind of person. Ask your parents about your potty training and compare that to how much of a neat freak you are, and I promise you're actually probably going to see a correlation, because this is one of the only things that I give Freud credit for. The phallic stage is 3 to 6 years old. The phallic stage is when Freud says you discover your genitals and that you have incestuous feelings for your parents. So that he believed in the opposite sex of parents. So this obviously is debated today because of homosexuality. But he believed if you were a little girl, you unconsciously had incestuous feelings for your father. And if you were a little boy, you unconsciously had incestuous feelings for your mother. He believed that that sexual urges went away from 6 to puberty, and then when puberty hit, that is where you mature into your sexual interests. So there's your psychosexual stages. With those, obviously, we have to talk about when we talk like about the genital stage, the Oedipus complex. This is when you were not satisfied or completed in the phallic stage. You then grow up with actual sexual feelings for your mother, or the electric complex, you grow up with actual sexual feelings for your father. Freud believed in this and said he had documented cases of adults who were actually sexually attracted to their parents. Identification happens as a child. This is where a child tries to become like the rival parent. For example, like a little boy tries to become like his father because mommy likes daddy. So if I'm like daddy, then mommy will like me. That's where that comes from. So the next time you see dads and sons or moms and daughters in matching outfits, it may not look as cute to you anymore. And fixation, once again, fixation is where you are stuck in one of the psychosexual stages. All right. I know I'm probably grossing you out. Freud also believed in what's called defense mechanisms. There are a few defense mechanisms that do hold weight, do hold water, do hold stock. The majority of them do not. If we were together in class, we would do a lot with these defense mechanisms, but obviously we're not together. So I'll give you an opportunity to kind of play with some of them. So the reason we have defense mechanisms is because your ego protects itself with tactics that reduce or redirect anxiety by distorting reality. Remember, your ego's job is to go between your id and your superego. So your ego is going to try to make you feel better about what you're choosing to do. So these defense mechanisms, according to Freud, are all about protecting your ego to make you feel good about decisions that you make. Obviously, repression, we don't believe in. But Freud believed that we use repression to banish anything from our conscious that we don't want to think about. And these things could appear in our dreams or could appear, in Freudian slips. Regression is where we retreat to acting to more like a baby, like homesickness. He believed that this was a defense mechanism that was used, once again, to protect the ego. But this is why people would still bite their nails, because biting your nails is similar to sucking your thumb. Reaction formation is your ego unconsciously makes unacceptable impulses look like the opposites. Like when you get dumped and you say, I'm so glad we broke up, I hate him. You're actually saying that because you love him and you're just trying to make yourself feel better about it. Projection is one that is held to a high account by Freud. And projection is when you take whatever you are doing that you know is wrong and you put it on someone else. For example, if you are in a relationship and I'm the girlfriend and I have a boyfriend, if the boyfriend always accuses me of cheating, it's because he's cheating. He is projecting what he is doing onto me to make his actions justified. And the famous phrase that goes with that is the thief thinks everyone is a thief. Rationalization is where you are trying to come up with a reason for your behavior, like I drink to be social, not because I have a drinking problem. And displacement is the other one that holds a lot of water for Freud. People actually believe this. Displacement is where you divert sexual or aggressive impulses that you can't put on the person you want to put it on, so you put it on somebody else. So your parents are very mad at you, but you know that you can't react back towards your parents, and so you kick the family dog because the dog's not going to ground you or take your cell phone. So you displace that anger to someone else. We do have people that are neo-Freudians, and that means they took stuff from Freud and kind of applied it to a different way. The most famous one of that is Carl Jung, and Carl Jung believed in the collective unconscious. This is why he says every early religion has a flood story when these religions didn't have people that were communicating with each other across the world. He believes in the unconscious and the idea that we have, as humans, we're all born with the same kind of stuff buried into our unconscious that we can tap into. Okay. These are tests that pull things out of your mind, out of your unconscious, according to Freud. And yeah, that's kind of it. So that was one whole video, honestly, just for Freud. Thanks, guys.